how did what you learned in film school and applying it to the real world, like how accurate was it and how inaccurate was it?
If I were to give a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being very accurate, like extremely accurate, 1 being, um, you know, not accurate whatsoever, total miss, I would give it a maybe a 3 or a 4.
Oof, that's a low score.
I mean, it's just, again, like, you can only learn. I know I've said this a lot, but you can only learn so much, I think, in film school. And, like, one big thing, though, that it does not teach you is the business of it all. And you have to consider, too, it's like when you're in film school, they're kind of teaching you, I guess, the sort of angle of maybe, like, I don't know, Hollywood film production. Whereas now I'm like, in my career, it's like, okay, I want to be a solo filmmaker. I don't necessarily care so much about big budget, big crew productions, for this network or whatever. And a lot of those things just aren't necessary. I mean, it's sort of cool to maybe learn. It's like, see these like big like jib cranes or whatever, or like, but it's like, I'm not going to use one of those if I'm shooting by myself. That's just one example. But like, it's like if you're trying to be as far as I can only say from my perspective as like where I'm at now, where I'm trying to go with my career as a filmmaker who's trying to have his own video production business, and shooting the types of projects that I'm doing, these say these brand videos, I wouldn't say film school is very helpful for that. I would say, okay, I learned certain basic things like this is a close-up shot, this is a wide shot, this is what your shutter speed needs to be, but I didn't learn, I guess how to network with people in my field, or like the types of people, like certain clients I would want to network with. They don't teach you those sort of communication skills. You don't learn business skills whatsoever. Even if you are trying to maybe go down the traditional maybe Hollywood route, you don't learn, like, I guess, the business of film. And like, but like, what are contracts? Like, how do you set up a contract? What do you put in your contract? Or how much do you charge? I mean, they don't teach you that in film school. Yeah.
What about if you were to go to a film school and pursue being a producer? They still don't teach you that stuff?
No, no, not really. I mean, if you wanted to like learn those certain roles like of producer or DP, you really only learn by just doing those independent like film projects. You learn about, and there could be some value in that too. Though, like, you want to be a producer, okay, we'll go produce on more student films. But I think that more or less could be one where, say, someone who went to film school and was trying to be a producer, and they did produce a lot of student films, then they may say like, oh yeah, what I learned here was very accurate as far as where I wanted to go in my career as a producer. Sure. I'm just saying, in my own experience, like,
Right.
yeah, it wasn't really like accurate because of where I particularly wanted to go in filmmaking. Yeah, I mean, there's classes for that if you want to take them, but I guess when you're, 18 or 20 years old, you don't, I guess, kind of realize what, I guess is needed in the real world. Like, that's just a whole thing we could go down, if we had more time with, I think, just college in general, is that I think college kind of creates like a little Disneyland sort of environment.
Right.
Where whether you're a film major or a social sciences major, like, you're not experiencing the real world. Sure, like, you're taking some classes, you're learning some things about the world, but I think the best way you can learn about anything in the world is just by what I've learned after now going through college, is just by actually putting yourself in these scenarios in the real world. It's like, you want to learn about business. Okay, you can maybe take a few classes in business school, but what would really help you is if you say, I don't know, you shadowed an entrepreneur, or you followed like a startup company. Like those are the things that's what you'll really learn, is by putting yourself in these real world scenarios. And film school is just one example of that. One, I guess, part of that, that just goes to show, how you can learn like all these different things in film school, like these different ideas, different theories, even like history, what have you, but how it actually goes down, how the business of filmmaking plays out, how, or maybe how just filmmakers operate on actual shoots. I feel like there's sort of a gap there between like what professors teach you like in their fundamentals and how filmmakers actually operate. Like for instance, I was on I was shooting a wedding with I was shadowing a wedding with a wedding videographer, because I was starting to get into weddings. And it was like, for instance, it was complete, like it was total sunny outside. It was completely sunny. I had always been told, it's like you keep your shutter speed at this, you keep your aperture at this. And I'm just like, oh, just let me get an ND filter. It's very sunny out. He's just like, oh, just crank the shutter speed. And I'm like, really? He's like, yeah. So that's just, I guess it's sort of like a little tangent. But yeah, again, I feel like I'm going in circles. Is that good?
That works. It's like, it seems to me like from what you were saying that a lot of what film school teaches you is kind of like more book work in a sense. Maybe not literally 100% of it, but for the most part, it can almost be like a professor teaching you theory over teaching you real world application, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because from the people that I've personally know that have gone to film school, like I haven't met a ton of them, but I've met enough of them to kind of gauge like, okay, it doesn't sound like film school is really worth it for you. Like I'll usually meet some people I meet are like very arrogant and like think they know everything, and they're very bossy in their direction because they believe that they're right, but then their actual film credentials, or even if you just look at their body of work, it's very low, like on the totem pole, or like just low in quality. There's some people that whenever I always ask them like, was film school like actually worth it to you? And then a lot of the reasons is usually like, oh, it was too expensive for what we were actually taught, or the industry changes so fast that the information that they teach is outdated, or a lot of times, like you were mentioning before, they teach you like how to operate on a Hollywood level. Like there was one guy that to make his own short film, he didn't want to do it because he thought he had to get permits for everything, even though none of the locations that he wanted to film at required a permit. But he was stuck in this mentality that he had to do that he had to rent out these big equipment, had to get all these like logistical paperwork type of stuff. And then one thing that I've noticed is that they just don't seem to know that on a higher level, yeah, that's true, but you don't have that type of money or manpower. So it's like you got to learn how to just do it on a much like stripped down level. Like, do you think that my question for you is like, do you think that all that technical, do everything by the book mentality is what's typically taught at film school?
Yeah, pretty much. And that's a great like example of how you pointed out that guy you knew about, the permit story. I mean, yeah, because it kind of just goes to show that bigger picture of, I guess, like when you're now out of film school as a filmmaker or trying to be a filmmaker, all you know is just what like film school taught you, and you think that like, okay, this is how it actually works. But then you kind of realize that there's different ways of approaching, the industry, approaching making films. And yeah, there's really like, I guess, it's like you kind of learn anything goes really. And it really was like, I guess, kind of by the book in that regard. Like, it's kind of, the professors sort of teach you like, no, this is how it really goes down. And then you graduate, you kind of see how it may also go down. And it's like, oh, I didn't realize it could also be like that, Mm-hmm. So you're only all you know as as a film school student is just what you were shown. You're not a master of the craft. You're a master, or maybe not, of just what was taught to you, really, you know?
Right. Because from at least my impression of like talking to people that have gone to film school, like what is usually kind of apparent or what I've kind of picked up on about it is that they're taught just this basic level of stuff, like enough to like understand like how to do it, like just do it. Maybe not do it well, but you can start something from A to Z. Whether it's good or not is another person's taste. And then where all the real learning comes in is just taking that knowledge and applying it to the real world. And then that's when you basically enter like a new sort of university in a way. Do you think that's accurate?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Yeah, it's, since graduate film school, like you kind of are unwittingly, yeah, you are entering a sort of whole other university, in a way. I like how you put that. Because, yeah, there's just so much more to learn, and like, and how you're describing is very accurate, how it's like, just those fundamentals, those basics, that are taught to you. But another thing to think about is like, they don't teach you like the nuances that may come about and how to deal with those. And so I think it's the reason why they don't teach you is because you can't really experience those in a sort of fixed kind of setting. Like, say for instance, you did a video, I think a few months ago, where like you talked about like a nightmare of a client that you had to deal with, or, maybe less on the business side, maybe you, are trying to figure out like, okay, how can I bring this camera into this sort of setting? I'm doing a travel video. Will this camera work with this? What kind of lens should I bring? Like all these different sort of things that isn't taught to you really, and you kind of have to learn for yourself. And I really think eventually you are going to have to teach yourself certain things, no matter like, even if you went to grad school for film, like you're going to have to, put yourself into those scenarios and teach yourself. It's like, if you still want to go to film school knowing that, go ahead, be my guest. But now me knowing that, I wouldn't, now that I know that, I wouldn't really want to pay for something like that. Knowing that it's like, well, if I'm going to learn this anyway, if I'm going to have to teach myself these things anyway, I might as well just go do it now. And the only expense is just the camera, the editing software, whatever, just like the actual tools I have. I'll just go figure out how to do it. And that's kind of like what this past year has really been for me, is just sort of like making those mistakes. And I still make them. I think like, you're always going to make mistakes. You're always going to continue to make mistakes, and fail, but that's the only way you're going to learn. As a filmmaker, definitely. As an artist, as a business man, what have you, like, you're always going to have to throw yourself into those scenarios and, face failure in order to learn and grow.
Yeah, that's why to me, like YouTubers versus like film school professors, like the YouTubers are much better teachers, because the professors, they're typically people that they know how to do it, but they were just taught like how to do it, but don't know how to like physically do it in many cases, it seems like. So it's like they'll teach you how to be a filmmaker, but because they haven't physically been a filmmaker before, there's only so much they can teach you. They could only teach you like very technical things. Where people on YouTube, it's like they teach you those same things, except they apply it to a more modernized sense. And then also they apply that same information to all the new gear that's coming out. Or they share all their client experiences and all their business experiences like that. Like, when I was in school, it would have been great to know how do you travel with your gear? Because you're probably going to do that at some point. Like, how do you do taxes when you run your own production company? How do you work these situations that they get so like when you're on set, like you're always running into problems, and a lot of them are, some of them are pretty unique in a way, and you just don't really know what to do. And it's just like, how do you, being taught how to deal with stuff like that is so important. And it's one of those things where if you don't learn how to do it, then it's something that catches you really off guard. Like, even I think something that can be good for like a film school is like even just having like, one example can be like, let's have someone come in and pretend that he's a really shitty client, and you have to argue with him and you have to debate with him on stuff. That might be a useful thing to learn. Like, he's gonna throw all these jabs at you just to see if you can cave on like giving him a cheaper rate or something like that.
Yeah.
Or even just I don't know, tell him apply for an internship somewhere and like and shadow those people, and then like kind of just do a mixture of both.